How to take flash pictures, Part 3, Beyond the Basics. What we will cover in Part 3, Beyond the Basics, Flash Range and the Inverse Square Law, Common Problems and Solutions, and other techniques. Range and the Inverse Square Law of Light. The inverse square law of light is 1 over the distance squared. What that means is with the same light, when you double the distance from the light to the subject, the light on the subject is 1/4 the illumination. So 1 over 2 squared. When you double the distance from the light to the subject, you need 4 times the light to maintain the same exposure. So all this may seem a little complicated. So we have this diagram. This is the diagram of the inverse square law of light. When you double the distance, you go from the left box to the right set of boxes. You double the distance, you double both in the horizontal and vertical axis. So you double the horizontal, you double the vertical. What does that mean? You're talking area, not linear. This is how the inverse square law of light works. You double the distance, but you quadruple the area. That is 2 squared. How to adjust for range. On the camera, you adjust the ISO level. You decrease the ISO for closer subjects, making the camera less sensitive to light. You increase the ISO for farther subjects and more range. You are increasing the sensitivity to light. On the flash, you adjust the flash power. You decrease the power for closer subjects, or you increase the power for farther subjects and more range. A large area flash with a shoe flash. So how did we pull this one off? Remember we said we adjust the ISO? Well, in this case, we adjust the ISO, we raise the ISO level up, and we run the flash at full power. And like other things, test. You may have to make adjustments. Problems: red eye, shadows, exposure. Red eye. Look at the picture on the top right. What is it? Red eye is the reflection of the blood vessels on the back of the eye. It is usually and worse with the iris of the eye wide open. The closer the flash is to the lens, the more likely you are to have red eye. Look at the diagram on the bottom. Green is the flash, blue is the light from the flash to the eye. The red line is the reflection back to the camera, which is the purple. So if the blue light goes out, hits the back of the eye, and reflects back as red to the camera. This is because the flash and the camera are close to each other. How to reduce or eliminate red eye? Option 1, increase the distance between the flash and the lens. If you look at the diagram below, flash in green diamond, light goes down to the eye. Reflection from the back of the eye goes back up to the flash, not to the camera in purple. By increasing the distance, you are increasing the angle of the reflection away from the lens. Thus, you won't see or reduce the amount of red eye you see. The other option is to cause the iris of the eye to close down. If you shine a flashlight at their eye or have them look at a bright light, the iris will close down, resulting in a smaller opening to the eye. That results in less visibility of the red. Shadows. Shadows is caused by the offset of the flash from the lens. You cannot eliminate shadows, but you can minimize it. A pop-up flash is fixed in position relative to the lens. If you rotate the camera for a vertical format picture, it will cast a shadow on the side of the subject, as in the top picture. I rotated the camera to the right. The pop-up flash is on the right of the camera. Hits the subject and casts a shadow to the left of the subject. If you hold the camera in a horizontal format, the flash is above the camera, hitting the subject, and the shadow is now below the subject. A shadow below the subject is typically less intrusive on the picture than a shadow to the side. A shoe flash on a flash bracket can be positioned above the lens, and it will cast a shadow behind and down, just like the bottom picture. Exposure. Flash using TTL is measuring the light reflected back from the subject and the scene. But just like a camera's meter, TTL flash can be fooled by the brightness or darkness of the subject and background. Therefore, you need to test and adjust the flash exposure compensation. Read your camera's manual on how to adjust your flash exposure compensation for your camera and flash. Other techniques: bounce flash and diffuse flash. Bounce flash. You soften the light and helps to even out the lighting and reduce or eliminate shadows. You can direct the flash to bounce off of any surface, the wall, ceiling, panel, floor, anything. This can only be done with a shoe flash where you can aim the head, because you need to aim the head either at the ceiling or the wall. If it's fixed forward, you can't bounce it because you can't aim it. The basic concept of bounce flash: the green is the flash, the blue is the light heading up to the ceiling and then bouncing back down to the subject. A comparison of direct and bounce flash off the ceiling with my very patient model. As you can see, picture left, below the arms and below the ears, you can see a harsh shadow. Picture right, the harsh shadows are gone. There are shadows if you look very carefully, but they are muted down, so you don't have that harsh, very black shadow. That is one of the benefits of bouncing off the ceiling. You get rid of that harsh shadow. Bounced light will take on the color of the surface it is bounced off of. Example: if I go to a restaurant with a red ceiling, if I aim my flash to the ceiling, the light coming down will have a red cast to it, and everything will have a red tint. Therefore, when I go to a restaurant that has a red ceiling or a red wall, I don't bounce off of the ceiling or wall. I use either diffuse or direct flash to avoid getting that red cast put on my subject. There is physics involved. Something called angle of incidence equals angle of reflectance. Flash hits the ceiling at 45 degrees, will reflect off the ceiling at 45 degrees. But a flash is not a laser. It is a wide pattern of light, so it'll be 45 degrees plus or minus a spread. Problems: you need enough distance between the flash and the subject to bounce the light. The higher the ceiling, the more distance you need. A close subject, a ceiling bounce will come down on the top of the subject's head, not their face. So when the subject is close, you don't want to do a ceiling bounce. The light goes up at 5 degrees, it will come down at 5 degrees. Better to bounce off the wall behind you. Examples: Height of the ceiling affects the angle of the bounce. Look at this diagram. The purple line is the low ceiling. Black line is the high ceiling. Look at the angle of the light as it heads towards the subject, which is the purple circle. The lower ceiling means you're coming down closer to the face. The higher ceiling means you're coming down to the top of their head. Distance to the subject. Close subject, purple circle, orange line. Light going up to the ceiling in the purple, coming down on the top of their head. Farther subject to the right. Blue line going up, coming down at a flatter angle, getting their face. Range and depth of lighting. We've seen this picture before. The overexposed girl in the front, the underexposed lady in the back. If you bounce the light, you even out the lighting more than a direct flash, so you have a better chance of getting all three people with more even illumination. Diffuse flash. Diffuse flash is putting a diffusion device over the flash to diffuse and spread the light. Indoors, a diffuse light will reflect off of walls and ceiling to give you some bounced light. Outdoors, a diffuser is almost useless, as there is nothing for the light to reflect off of. This is what one version of a diffuser looks like. It's basically a frosted plastic cover over the front of the lens that lets the light diffuse. As you can see, it has 3 dimensions. The forward light is diffused going up, but at the vertical sides will diffuse the lights going sidewards. So it diffuses the light going forward as well as to the side. So this flash, as it's currently set up, it'll send a diffused light to the ceiling, but it'll also send diffused light to the walls around the camera, and it'll reflect off of the walls. The end. Thank you and good luck, and please like and subscribe.